My cat keeps staring at the corner of my living room. The problem is, there's nothing there. At least, nothing I can see. It started a couple weeks ago. I'd catch him sitting perfectly still on the arm of the couch, head tilted, pupils blown wide, following something. Not a bug, not a shadow. His gaze would track across the empty air, like he was watching someone pace. The first time, I laughed it off. Cats are weird. You know that. They see dust, deflections, things we don't pay attention to. But then he started reacting. Ears flattening, fur rising, his tail flicking like he was seconds from bolting. Sometimes he'd hiss at the corner. Other times, he'd arch his back and lower his head, the way cats do when they're stalking prey. But prey isn't supposed to make my house feel colder. The strangest part, he doesn't look scared. Not really. He looks expectant, like he wants me to notice too. He'll glance back at me mid-stare, meow once, sharp, and then fix his eyes on the corner again, as if he's saying, "Do you see it yet?" And last night, he followed it out of the room. His paws padded soft over the hardwood, tail twitching, and he turned the corner into the hallway without once breaking his gaze on the air in front of him. His eyes glowed in the dim light, locked on something I couldn't make myself look at. I should have just stayed put, but I followed him. Now I can't shake the feeling that whatever he sees knows I followed too. The hallway was dark, except for the faint glow spilling from the living room behind me. My cat padded ahead, silent except for the soft click of claws on wood. His tail was stiff, his body low, but his gaze never wavered from the empty air just above him, like something tall was moving. Through my house, I whispered his name. He didn't even flick an ear. The deeper he went, the colder it got. I could feel it, the temperature dipping with every step I took behind him. My breath fogged faintly, and I stopped halfway down the hall, wondering if I was imagining it. But the chill clung to my skin like damp cloth. He stopped outside the spare bedroom. The door was cracked open. I hadn't been in there for days, no reason to. He sat, haunches tense, eyes locked on the gap. Then, without warning, he let out the strangest sound I've ever heard from him. Not a hiss, not a growl, but a low, vibrating yowl that made the hair on my arms rise. The door creaked wider. I swear to you, I hadn't touched it. My cat darted inside, tail lashing, vanishing into the dark. I stood frozen, staring into that room, trying to convince myself it was just the draft from an old house. Just wood shifting. Just coincidence. But the smell hit me. Faint, rot sweet, like wet leaves left too long under rain. A smell that didn't belong inside. I pushed the door open with my foot, heart hammering so hard it hurt, and swept the light from my phone across the room. Nothing. Empty bed, empty dresser, shadows stretching flat against the walls. But my cat wasn't looking at the furniture. He sat in the center of the rug, head tilted up at the far corner of the ceiling. His body trembled with that low growl, eyes round, locked on a patch of air I couldn't bring myself to follow. Then he did something worse. He turned, looked right at me, and meowed. One sharp sound, an invitation. That meow froze me in place. It wasn't casual. It wasn't hungry or playful. It sounded like a signal, a sharp, deliberate call. Look. I raised the light higher, forcing myself to sweep the beam across the ceiling. The corner was bare, just a pale triangle of drywall meeting two beams. Nothing moved. Nothing stirred. But my cat's head followed the light, like he expected me to finally see what he did. "Nothing's there," I whispered. My voice cracked anyway. The moment I said it, he hissed. Not at the ceiling, at me. His ears flattened, teeth flashing, tail puffed wide. He'd never done that before. Not to me. Then he turned back, eyes glued to the corner, as though my denial had angered him. The rot smell thickened. My throat tightened, metallic, like the air itself had weight. I wanted out. I reached for him, scooping him into my arms, his claws digging into my hoodie as I backed out of the room. The second the door shut, the house sighed. That's the only way I can describe it. A release of air from the walls, like something settling back into place. The smell faded. My cat stopped growling. He blinked up at me, calm now, and wriggled until I set him down. Then he trotted back toward the living room, like nothing had happened. But I couldn't stop shaking. That night, I barely slept. I left the lights on, every door shut. The cat curled against my side. I told myself it was over, that I'd imagined the cold, the smell, the door moving on its own. By dawn, I almost believed it, until I saw the ceiling. Right above the bed, etched faintly into the paint, were 4 parallel scratches, deep enough to expose wood. And the dust from the drywall wasn't on the sheets. It was on my cat's paws. I stared at those white smudges on his paws, my stomach rolling like I'd swallowed ice. He licked them absently, slow and thorough, like he was cleaning up after work he shouldn't have been able to do. Cats don't climb ceilings. They don't etch wood 4 feet above a man's reach. And yet, when he finished, he looked at me. Really looked. His head tilted in that way animals sometimes do when they're waiting for you to understand. A soft chirp slipped from him, almost affectionate, almost proud. I spent the morning trying to rationalize it. Old scratches I'd never noticed. Maybe he stepped in plaster dust near the baseboards. But no matter how I twisted it, the timeline didn't fit. By noon, the house felt wrong again. Shadows stretched too far. The silence between sounds seemed thicker, padded, like cotton stuffed in my ears. And he wouldn't stop staring. Not at me, at something just behind me. Every time I turned, nothing. Just a wall, a lamp, a doorway. But when I looked back, he was still locked in that pose, pupils wide, tail twitching, ears flicking as though he could hear it breathe. That night, it escalated. I woke to the sound of his paws thudding across the bed. At first, I thought he was chasing something. But no, his body was arched, his eyes fixed on the corner of the ceiling above my headboard. I didn't look. I couldn't. I just lay there, frozen, listening as he growled low in his throat, then leapt upward. His claws scraped plaster. I swear I felt the wall shiver. The room went silent. Then from the ceiling above me came the faintest sound. Not scratching, not hissing, breathing. Slow, steady, in sync with mine. I finally dared to glance up, and for the first time, I saw the ceiling sag. The plaster bowed downward, subtle but undeniable. My ceiling shouldn't move like that. My breath hitched, and for a terrible second, the breathing above me matched it. My inhale, its inhale. My exhale, its exhale. My cat yowled, a raw guttural sound that rattled my bones. He launched himself again, claws raking the sagging spot. A fine trickle of white dust rained onto my face. I choked, rolling from the bed, coughing as I scrambled toward the door. The ceiling groaned. Wood splintered. I didn't stay to see more. I scooped the cat into my arms and bolted into the hallway. My bare feet slapped against the cold wood as I ran for the kitchen, the only room that felt open, less boxed in. My chest burned, not just from the sprint, but from the air itself. It carried that same rot-sweet stink, heavier now, like the whole house was steeped in it. I set him on the counter. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He just crouched low, eyes fixed on the doorway behind me. His tail lashed, steady, like a metronome. The silence pressed down hard. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint buzz of the overhead light. Then came the sound I dreaded. Tap, tap, tap. Not from above this time, from the hallway floor. Slow, heavy, as if something with weight was testing each step. My cat chirped once, soft, sharp, and then did something I'll never forget. He looked at me. Then he looked at the empty doorway. Then back at me, as if asking me to finally see, to stop pretending. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But all I could do was grip the counter until my knuckles burned. The tapping stopped. Silence. Then a shadow stretched across the kitchen floor. The shadow crawled in first, long and warped, bending across the tiles as if cast by a body that wasn't there. My cat's fur bristled so high he looked twice his size. His growl deepened into something feral, a warning I'd never heard from him before. I wanted to back away, but my legs refused. The shadow stretched farther, curling around the counter, reaching toward my bare feet. I could feel the temperature drop with every inch it gained, like the cold was leaching up from the floorboards. My cat leapt straight into it. He clawed at nothing, hissed, spat, his body twisting midair as though he'd sunk his teeth into something invisible. For a split second, I swore I saw it. An outline, faint and flickering, like heat rising off asphalt. Tall, too tall, and leaning down, as if it was studying me through him. The smell hit me harder now, rank and sweet, like a slaughterhouse left to rot. My stomach turned violently. I gagged, stumbled back, and slammed against the fridge. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The shadow snapped back into the hallway. The cold lifted. The smell thinned. My cat dropped to the tiles, panting, his sides heaving as if he'd been in a fight. He licked one paw, and when he lifted it, his claws were bloody. I stared at the floor. No body, no wound, just tiny red smears that shouldn't exist. Something unseen had bled. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen with every light on, clutching a kitchen knife in one hand, and my cat curled restless in my lap. The house stayed silent, too silent, until just before dawn, I heard the whisper. Not from the hallway, not from the ceiling, from the dark space right beneath my chair. Notice me. I froze, every muscle locking as the words slithered up through the floorboards. My cat's ears flattened, and he pressed against me so hard I could feel his heart hammering against my ribs. The whisper wasn't loud, it wasn't even clear, but it was real. Too close, I forced myself to look down. The shadows beneath the chair seemed thicker, blacker, as if the light from the overhead bulb couldn't reach it. I gripped the knife tighter, though I knew metal wouldn't mean a thing against whatever this was. My cat growled at the dark, and for one awful moment, the darkness growled back. Low, deep, a sound that didn't belong in my kitchen, didn't belong in my world. I stumbled up, chair legs screeching across the tiles. The shadow seemed to pulse with the movement, swelling outward before, snapping flat again. The voice followed me, soft, coaxing. You see me now. The lights flickered, once, twice, then went out. The kitchen plunged into black. I dropped the knife. The clatter was deafening. My cat screamed, a sound I didn't think cats could make, and launched himself toward the hallway. I went after him, blind, hands stretched, heart pounding so loud it filled my skull. Somewhere in the dark, something moved beside me, close enough that I felt the air shift against my arm. When I finally burst into the living room, the lights there still worked. I collapsed onto the rug, gasping, the sudden glow almost painful. My cat crouched near the doorway, his body blocking it like a sentry. He never took his eyes off the kitchen. I couldn't move him. I couldn't move myself. We just stayed there, locked in that awful standoff, until the sun finally began to rise. For a moment, I thought daylight might save me. I thought maybe whatever lived in the shadows couldn't survive in the open. But then my cat turned, looked right at me, and for the first time since this began, his eyes weren't afraid. They were accusing. The look in his eyes cut deeper than any whisper, any shadow. My cat wasn't warning me anymore. He was blaming me, like I had failed some unspoken test. I whispered his name, hand trembling as I reached toward him. He didn't flinch. He didn't purr. He just stared, pupils thin and sharp, as if he was seeing me for what I really was, or what I wasn't. Then he turned away, slowly, deliberately. His tail flicked once before he padded into the kitchen. The very place I swore I wouldn't go back to. I begged under my breath, pleaded with him, but my voice cracked and broke into nothing. I followed anyway. What else could I do? The kitchen was brighter now, with morning light leaking through the blinds, stripes of gold cutting across the counters. But the shadows didn't move with the sun. They clung to the corners, thick and unmoving, as though the night had refused to leave. My cat sat right at the center, calm now, tail curled neatly around his paws. His eyes tracked something just above my shoulder. I turned. At first there was nothing, just the fridge humming, the light cutting across the tiles, the air stale and heavy. Then it shifted into view. Not a body, not even a face. A distortion, like the air itself was bending, funneling inward toward a center point. And from that point, something leaned closer. Something tall, impossibly tall, folding itself down to meet me. My breath left me in a ragged shiver. The smell of rot and sweetness pressed into my sinuses until tears stung my eyes. It spoke again. You notice. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My throat locked, lungs frozen, as if the thing had wrapped itself around my very breath. My cat purred, low, steady, almost approving, as if this was what he wanted all along. The distortion reached forward. Not a hand, not exactly, but the idea of one. It brushed my arm, and the skin beneath it burned cold, like ice carving deep into my flesh. I staggered back, but my cat blocked me. He looked up at me with those accusing eyes, and I swear he smiled. Or maybe that was the shadow bending his face. The thing leaned closer, so close I could feel its whisper inside my head, behind my eyes. You see, you stay. And then, blackness. I don't know how long I was gone. When I woke, I was still in the kitchen. The sun had risen fully. The shadows were gone. My cat sat in the same spot, tail flicking lazily. He meowed once, soft and sweet, as if nothing had happened. But I can still smell it, the rot, sweet air. The weight of something too tall, too patient, waiting just outside the light. And when my cat watches the empty corners, I don't dare look away anymore. Because if I don't notice it, I think it will notice me harder. And when the scratching starts again, I already know it isn't the cat. The night my cat came back, it didn't walk like itself. I was on the porch, cigarette burning down between my fingers, watching the empty street. The air was damp, the kind of damp that clings to your clothes and skin, heavy with the smell of wet soil after rain. My eyes were raw from lack of sleep. 3 days, 3 nights. I'd called, searched, rattled a bag of food until my voice cracked, but nothing. The yard felt emptier without him. Then I heard it, the soft pad of paws across gravel. I froze. It was too deliberate to be the wind, too steady to be a stray. The glow of the street lamp caught him first, my cat, slipping out of the shadows like he'd been waiting for me to notice. His fur was matted, his tail twitched wrong, like each movement belonged to someone else's rhythm. I dropped the cigarette. Jesus, where the hell have you been? I crouched, arms open. But he didn't come bounding into them the way he always used to. He just stood there at the edge of the light, eyes locked on mine. And they weren't the same. They reflected gold, yes, but deeper. Like there was something moving behind them, something I couldn't see. I whispered his name. That's when he opened his mouth, not to meow, not to cry, to whisper something back. The sound didn't belong in a cat's throat. It was soft, ragged, like words dragged over broken glass. My name in a whisper. I jerked back, nearly stumbling down the porch steps. My cat didn't move. He just stared, mouth still open, like he was waiting for me to answer. My skin crawled. I wanted to tell myself I'd imagined it, that the night air and the rattling leaves had played tricks on me. But then he did it again. Tom. Clearer this time. Wrong. Too human. I slammed the door shut between us. My hand shook against the wood. The silence that followed was worse than the whisper. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to hear anything. A meow. Paw steps. Scratching. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I thought maybe he'd run off again. Maybe I'd just lost my mind. But when I looked through the peephole, he was still there. Sitting. Perfectly still at the bottom of the porch steps. Eyes glowing in the dark. I couldn't stay in the doorway. Every part of me screamed to get away from that stare. I locked up every bolt, dragged a chair against the back door, and retreated to the living room. But even there, I couldn't relax. The house felt occupied, like the air was heavier, aware of me. I turned on the TV for noise, but the screen fizzled to static after a few seconds. White snow filling the room. That's when I heard it again, this time from the back window. Not the voice, the tapping. Slow, deliberate, like claws. The tapping came in pairs. Tap, tap. A pause. Tap, tap. I froze in the middle of the living room, the static buzzing from the TV behind me. My skin prickled, my throat dry. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help it. The blinds were down over the back window, thin slats, just enough to suggest a shape behind them. A shadow moved, slow and patient, dragging across the narrow cracks. Tap, tap. Tom. My knees nearly buckled. It wasn't muffled this time. It wasn't outside. It was pressed right against the glass, inches from me. I backed away, step by step, until the carpet gave way to the linoleum of the kitchen. I grabbed the first thing I could from the counter, a knife. My hand shook so hard the blade clattered against the tile when I lifted it. The tapping stopped. I don't know why, but I felt the urge to pull the blinds, to see, to make sure it really was my cat. My stupid, broken brain whispered, maybe you're overreacting. Maybe it's fine. Just check. I reached. The plastic cord of the blinds felt slick in my sweaty palm. I tugged once, twice, and the slats snapped upward with a clatter. Empty. No cat, no shadow, just the night. The yard was still, moonlight cutting the grass silver. I almost laughed. Almost. But then, movement, far at the tree line. Something darted behind a trunk. Small, low, fast. I pressed closer to the glass, squinting, heart pounding. And then I saw them. 2 points of light. Not like cat eyes. Not like any animal. Too far apart. Too high off the ground. Watching. The knife nearly slipped from my hand. I whispered without thinking, "That's not him." And the lights blinked. The blink was wrong. Too slow. Too human. I stumbled back from the window, gripping the knife so tight my knuckles burned. My breath fogged the glass. When I blinked, the lights were gone. The yard looked empty again, silent, ordinary. But ordinary didn't feel safe anymore. I yanked the blinds down, tripping over the chair I'd wedged at the back door. My heart pounded so hard, I could hear it in my ears, drowning out every other sound, except a scrape against the wood of the porch. Then, a low, guttural mew, my cat's voice. This time, it almost sounded real. Almost. I didn't move. I couldn't. The scrape came again, like claws dragging across the step. And then, silence. Heavy, pressing silence. The kind that makes you realize you're holding your breath. I thought about calling someone. But who? The police? Tell them my cat was whispering my name and standing like a man in the yard? They'd hang up. I was alone. And then, from the corner of the room, I heard it. Not outside, not at the door. Inside. A thump. Soft, but deliberate. I turned toward the hallway, knife trembling in my hand. The sound had come from my bedroom, the place where I'd left the window cracked open earlier that day. I told myself not to go. I begged myself, but you know how it is. When you hear something in your own house, you have to look. Each step down that hallway felt like it stretched a mile. My bare feet stuck to the floorboards with sweat. I gripped the knife higher, my wrist aching. When I reached the bedroom door, I pushed it open with the blade. Moonlight spilled across the floor. And sitting right in the middle of it, tail curled, eyes glowing, my cat. But his mouth was still moving, and the whisper wasn't stopping. He sat in the middle of the floor, his shadow stretching unnaturally long across the boards. His fur looked darker than before, matted like he'd rolled in ash. And his mouth? It never closed. The whisper was steady, rasping, like wind funneled through a throat that wasn't meant to speak. The words weren't sharp or clear, but they tugged at the edge of recognition. Syllables bent around a voice that wasn't human and wasn't animal. I wanted to back away, to slam the door shut and lock it. But my body leaned forward instead, drawn like I was leaning over the edge of a cliff. My knife hand shook. "Buddy," I whispered, barely audible. His head snapped toward me too fast, like a puppet on a string. His eyes caught the moonlight, glowing silver instead of green. And then he smiled. A split second of curled lips and tiny teeth, like the face wasn't built for it. My gut lurched. The whispering stopped. Silence pressed against my ears, almost louder than the voice had been. My cat's body was still, tail curling like smoke. But something else filled the room, thick and unseen. I smelled earth, damp earth, like freshly dug soil. And then from behind me, at the far end of the hallway, a second sound began. Scratching, slow, deliberate scratching against the wall. I didn't turn at first. I was too locked on my cat, his unblinking eyes staring holes through me. But the scratching grew louder, closer, a dragging fingernail kind of sound, steady and patient. When I finally turned, the hallway was dark, just a stretch of shadow, broken by the dim glow of the nightlight at the very end. And in that pale glow, something shifted. A tall shape leaned against the wall, long arms, head bent, waiting. I blinked, and it was gone, but the scratching hadn't stopped. The scratching dragged deeper, nails carving through plaster. My teeth hurt just hearing it. I forced myself to step back into the bedroom, knife shaking in my hand. My cat didn't move. He just sat there, pupils blown wide, mouth hanging slightly open again, whispering without sound now, like he was mouthing a prayer only he understood. The scratching stopped. Silence. I held my breath, waiting for something. Footsteps, a knock, anything. But the house was quiet. Too quiet. That was when I realized the night sounds outside, the crickets, the rustling leaves, had vanished. Nothing lived beyond those walls anymore. Just me, my cat, and whatever else had come back with him. Then, 3 knocks. Not on the door, not on the window, from inside the wall. Knock, knock, knock. My skin went ice cold. I stumbled back, colliding with the dresser. Drawers rattled. The sound echoed like the house itself was hollow, like the knocks had come from inside its bones. "Stop," I whispered. But it wasn't to them. It was to myself. Like maybe if I stopped acknowledging it, it would fade. My cat rose slowly to his feet. His tail swayed in sharp, deliberate arcs. His gaze shifted from me to the wall, and for the first time, he hissed. The sound tore through the silence, feral and violent. His back arched, claws scraping across the floorboards. Then the wall moved. The plaster bulged outward for a second, like something pressed against it from the other side. A hand. I swear to God, I saw the faint outline of fingers pushing through, stretching the surface like wet paper. I ran. I don't even remember deciding, but my body chose. Knife clutched to my chest. I bolted down the hall, past the nightlight that flickered as I passed. The house seemed to twist, every shadow leaning closer, every board beneath my feet groaning like they wanted to give way. Behind me, I heard the crack of splitting wood, and my cat scream. The scream didn't sound like him. It was higher, jagged, almost human in its agony. It echoed down the hallway as I stumbled into the living room, lungs burning, knife slick in my sweaty grip. I wanted to run out the front door, but the moment my hand hit the lock, the knob turned on its own. I froze. The metal was icy, as though someone gripped it from the outside. I backed away, staring, waiting for it to open. But it didn't. The knob just twisted back into place with a slow click, like it was mocking me. Behind me, claws scraped across the floor. I spun around. My cat limped into the room, dragging one leg. His fur bristled, patches torn, as if invisible teeth had bitten him. He opened his mouth, and for the first time, clear words tumbled out. "Don't let it in." The voice was raw, guttural, torn from a throat not meant to shape language. My stomach turned. My hand shook so violently, the knife nearly slipped. "Buddy!" My voice cracked. My eyes burned. He collapsed, wheezing. His chest heaved, glowing faintly under the ribs like something inside him was alive, trying to get out. His eyes locked on mine, desperate, pleading. And then, every light in the house went out. Pitch black. Only the sound of his ragged breathing and something else moving in the dark. A slithering drag, slow, deliberate, circling me. I held the knife out in front of me, part slamming against my ribs. "If you were me," I whispered, though my voice was swallowed by the dark, "would you have run?" The slithering stopped. A cold breath kissed the back of my neck, and then my cat screamed one last time. The sound split the dark wide open. The scream was sharp enough to shatter me. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears, knife clattering to the floor. The sound rattled the walls, made the air vibrate until it cut off all at once, like someone hit mute. Silence. I reached out, trembling, searching in the dark for my cat. My hands met the floorboards, sticky and warm. Blood. Then a flicker. The lamp by the couch buzzed to life, weak and yellow. Just enough light to see him. My cat lay on his side, chest rising and falling in tiny, shallow jerks. His fur was soaked, his body broken, but his eyes were still locked on me, and for the first time, they looked like his again, green, wide, familiar. He opened his mouth, trembling. "Run." Behind him, the wall split. The plaster peeled apart like skin, revealing a dark, wet gap. From it, a shape emerged, taller than the doorway, head bent low, limbs too many, dragging itself into my living room with the patience of a nightmare that knew it had already won. I staggered back, nearly slipping in the blood. My cat twitched, forcing himself upright, standing between me and it. His fur flared, tail puffed, though his body shook. The thing's face, or what I thought was a face, hung low, stretching into the light, holes where eyes should be. A jaw that split in two, opening wider than it should, like a cave breathing. And then, in a voice that sounded like my own, it whispered, "Stay." I couldn't move. My legs refused. But my cat lunged. Broken, bleeding, half dead, he lunged. He hit the thing's chest, claws digging deep, and the room erupted in a howl not made for human ears. The plaster rattled. The glass in the window cracked. The thing reeled back toward the gap, dragging my cat with it. His green eyes burned into mine one last time. And then they were gone. The wall sealed shut. I stood there until dawn, shaking, knife useless at my feet. The house was still, silent, ordinary again. But every night since, I've heard scratching inside the walls. Sometimes I hear the low rasp of my name. And sometimes, God help me, I hear a faint meow, muffled, like it's coming from the other side of the plaster. So if your cat ever disappears and comes back, wrong. Don't wait for the warning. Run. I buried my cat 3 nights ago in the hard soil just beyond the porch light's reach. Now something keeps scratching at my back door. I know what you're thinking. Raccoons maybe, or a stray looking for food. I thought that too. But I've lived in this house long enough to recognize the difference between claws on wood and paws on metal. What I heard last night wasn't random. It was deliberate. Slow drags. Then sharp taps. The exact rhythm my cat used to make when she wanted inside. Her name was Miso. She wasn't special to anyone but me. Just a small gray tabby who followed me everywhere, even into the bathroom if I forgot to close the door. She was the only thing in this empty house that felt alive. I wrapped her in one of my old flannels before lowering her into the dirt. I told myself it was a proper goodbye, but the ground was cold. The sky was darker than usual, and for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that I just made a mistake I couldn't undo. The first night after, I kept the TV on to fill the silence. Around midnight, I heard it. A faint scritch, like nails over hollow wood. I froze, pressed mute, and there it was again. 3 taps, a pause, another long drag, as though something was testing the door's strength. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Instead, I sat in the glow of the television, holding the remote like it could protect me, and listened until the sound faded. But last night the scratching came again. Louder, closer, and when I leaned my ear against the door, I swear I heard breathing on the other side. Tell me, what would you have done? Because when I finally gathered the nerve to peek through the blinds, the yard was empty, completely still. And yet, the doormat was gone. I didn't sleep after that. How could I? The doormat wasn't just gone. It had been dragged. I found the faint trail in the morning, a shallow groove pressed into the dew-dark grass, leading straight toward the backyard, toward her grave. I followed it barefoot, every step heavy. The air smelled sour, like overturned soil and wet fur. My heart kicked against my ribs when I saw the mound of dirt. It wasn't flat anymore. The ground looked disturbed, softer, like something had shifted underneath. I told myself it was the rain. It had stormed briefly before dawn. Maybe that was enough to sink the soil, to make the grass bend. But why was my doormat half buried in the dirt? Why did it look like it had been pulled down rather than carried? I didn't touch it. I couldn't. Instead, I backed away, trying not to look at the small depression forming at the center of the grave, like something pressing upward from below. All day, I tried to distract myself. Phone, work emails, mindless scrolling, but my eyes kept straying to the back door. I taped the blinds shut. I told myself it was over. But when the sun dropped and the shadows stretched across the kitchen floor, the silence pressed in on me again. Around 11, it started. Not scratching this time, thumping. Small, rhythmic thuds, like something weakly throwing itself against the wood. I pressed my palms flat to the table, shaking so hard I couldn't stand. My cat had been small, barely 10 pounds. Whatever was outside sounded heavier. The thud stopped, but the silence after was worse. My ears strained, waiting for the next sound, praying I'd hear nothing. That's when I realized I could hear the faintest purr. It wasn't warm, like the hum miso used to make curled against my chest. This was ragged, wet, like air pulled through torn lungs. And then it spoke. Not words, not really. Just a broken imitation of the only sound I ever taught her to beg with. A single, warbling syllable. Meow. That's when the door handle began to turn. The handle rattled once, sharp and quick, like someone testing it. My knees nearly buckled. I don't even remember standing up, but suddenly I was pressed flat against the far wall of the kitchen, staring at the doorknob as it shivered in its socket. It turned halfway, stopped, turned back. Something out there knew how the handle worked. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a kitchen knife left drying on the counter. My grip was slick with sweat. Every second felt stretched thin, my ears ringing, waiting for the latch to click open. But it didn't. The handle stilled. Silence. I thought maybe it had left. Maybe it was just my nerves conjuring shapes in the dark. But then, slow as breath, the sound came again. That wet, ruined purr, right up against the doorframe. Meow! I covered my mouth to keep from making a sound. My chest ached from holding the air in. And for the first time, I wondered if this thing, whatever it was, could hear my heartbeat. Because I swear the purr deepened each time my pulse jumped. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes? Hours? The next thing I remember is light. Morning bleeding through the cracks in the blinds. And the handle, finally, mercifully, still. When I opened the door the next day, against every screaming instinct, I saw nothing but damp wood. No prints, no scratches. Just one single thing left on the mat, dead center. It was Miso's collar. I buried her with it. The leather strap was snapped clean through, as if torn apart from the inside. I dropped it right there on the porch and backed into the house, my stomach twisting so violently I thought I'd be sick. That collar had been 6 feet under. How the hell had it ended up at my door? And yet even then, part of me wanted to pick it up, to hold it, to smell it, just to know if it still carried her scent. But I didn't. I left it there, baking under the noon sun, while I locked every window and door I had. By nightfall, the collar was gone. And that's when the scratching started on the upstairs window. The first scrape came just past midnight. A high, brittle squeal of claws against glass. It sliced me out of half sleep and dropped me into a pit of cold panic. I lay frozen in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun shadows across the room. Another scrape followed, longer this time, deliberate. The sound of something testing the window pane, hunting for weakness. I forced myself upright, each movement stiff. my chest tight. My bedroom overlooks the backyard. I knew what I'd see if I dared pull back the curtain, but I had to know. The moon was bright enough that night to silver the whole yard. The grave looked darker than the rest of the grass, like a bruise spreading wider. The soil was caving inward, as if it were swallowing itself, and pressed against the glass, just inches from my face, was the curve of a paw. Not soft and pink like hers used to be. This one was wrong, split, the pads torn, claws extended so far they looked more like hooked nails than anything feline. The flesh clung in damp strips. I staggered back, knocking over the lamp. The paw twitched, scratched, slid slowly down the window, leaving behind a trail of something black that shimmered under the moonlight. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out, only a hiss of breath. And then it stopped. The paw slicked away. The glass was bare again, smeared with residue I didn't want to name. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat curled in the hallway with the knife clutched to my chest, whispering her name under my breath, as if the real Miso might somehow come back and chase the shadow of her away. But by dawn, exhaustion swallowed me. I woke to sunlight burning across the stairs, and for the briefest, most awful moment, I thought I heard the soft thud of tiny paws padding across the floorboards. Inside, I followed the sound, heart in my throat, until I reached the kitchen. Nothing was there. No prints, no movement, just silence, except the back door was standing wide open. The door swayed gently, letting in the damp morning air. My first thought was that I'd forgotten to lock it, but I remembered the weight of the bolt sliding into place. I remembered double-checking. I remembered the sound of the latch. Something had opened it. The grass outside glittered with dew. The yard looked still, ordinary, like any other morning. But the air carried that sour, turned earth smell again. I didn't step past the threshold. I just stood there, barefoot, watching the yard breathe in silence. Then I noticed the prints. They weren't paw prints, not anymore. They started small, round, like Miso's had been. But with every step, they warped, widened, lengthened. By the time they reached the grave, they didn't look like any animal I'd ever seen. More like the beginnings of a hand dragging itself from the soil. The mound had collapsed entirely. A shallow pit gaped where I'd buried her. The flannel I'd wrapped her in hung shredded from a branch of the nearest tree, dripping mud. I slammed the door shut, locked it, pushed the kitchen table against it for good measure. My hand shook so badly, I nearly dropped the knife I'd carried down with me. All day I paced. Every creak of the house sent my heart racing. I tried to call someone, anyone, but what could I say? My dead cat's digging. Her way back inside, they'd laugh, or worse, they'd come check, and I'd have to show them the grave. I didn't want another pair of eyes on it. I didn't want to confirm it was real. By dusk, the house felt smaller, tighter, like the walls were leaning in. I kept catching glimpses in the corners, shadows too small to be mine. Once, I swore I saw her tail flick around the hallway corner. I followed it into the living room, and that's when I heard it. The jingling, her collar, from somewhere deep inside the walls. I pressed my ear against the plaster. The faint scrape of claws drifted through, followed by that broken guttural purr, vibrating against my skull. And then, just beneath my ear, something whispered, Not a meow, not a purr, a word. Hungry. I staggered back from the wall so fast I tripped over the coffee table, sending the knife clattering across the floor. Hungry. That word didn't belong to her. It didn't belong to anything natural. For a long time, I didn't move. I just lay there on the rug, staring at the wall, like it might split open. The house felt alive, pulsing with a sound too low to be heard, only felt. Like the hum of a predator's chest right before it strikes. By midnight, the noises started again. Not at the door, not at the window. From inside. First a skitter, light and quick, moving along the baseboards. Then a low groan, as if wood was bowing under weight. I grabbed the knife and a flashlight and pressed myself against the hallway wall, every muscle locked. The beam shook in my hand, throwing jagged shapes across the ceiling. The jingling came again, soft, metallic, moving toward me. I should have run. Out the front door, into the night, anywhere but here. But my feet rooted to the floor. And when the sound stopped just around the corner, my hand lifted the flashlight on its own, slow, unwilling, like my body wanted to see what my mind couldn't bear. Nothing, just the empty hallway, until the beam slid lower. Claws, hooked, curling claws, just peeking from beneath the couch. I froze. My throat burned from holding back the scream swelling there. The claws twitched, scraped against the hardwood with a deliberate patience that made my skin crawl. I backed away, inch by inch, the knife raised uselessly in my trembling hand. The flashlight flickered, once, twice, and in that pulse of darkness, I heard it crawl. Fast, too fast. By the time the light steadied again, the claws were gone. The space beneath the couch was empty. But the air smelled different now. Hotter, rank, like open meat left in the sun. And I swear, just behind me, I felt the brush of fur against my ankle. I spun, knife slashing wild at the empty air. No one there. Nothing but my shadow stretched across the kitchen tiles. Then the whisper came again, closer this time, as if it were rising right up my spine. Let me in. The words sank into me like teeth. I stumbled back until my shoulders hit the wall, the knife still trembling in my grip. Let me in. My cat never spoke. Not like that. Not with words. Whatever was wearing her voice wasn't her. The silence after was worse. It stretched long and empty, a held breath that pressed against my ears until I swore they'd pop. Then came the sound that broke me. The faint rhythm of paws padding across the floorboards upstairs. I lived alone. Each step was deliberate, pacing the length of the hallway above me. Back and forth, claws clicking faintly on wood. I craned my neck, staring at the ceiling as dust rained lightly down from the vibrations. The attic ladder was up there, closed tight. I hadn't been inside for months. But now, the weight of something shifted above it, heavier than a 10-pound cat, dragging itself slow across the beams. I couldn't stay, not trapped in those walls. I yanked the front door open and bolted into the night. The air was damp, thick, with the smell of wet earth. My flashlight beam caught the yard, and my stomach turned cold. The grave was gone, not disturbed, not dug up, gone. A pit gaped there now, wide and hollow. The soil clawed outward as if something had erupted from below. The sound followed me out, a low, rasping purr, but stretched too deep, too human. It seemed to come from every shadow at once, bleeding into the trees, the ground, the wind itself. I stumbled back toward the porch, torn between running farther or locking myself back inside. And that's when I saw it. 2 eyes low to the ground, glowing faint in the beam of my light. At first, I thought they were hers, Miso's yellow-green eyes, reflecting the way they always had. But then they rose, higher and higher still, until they hovered at my own height. The pupils stretched, thin and vertical, locking straight onto me. The purr broke into a laugh, and the front door slammed shut behind me. The slam shook the porch beneath my feet. I spun, lunging for the knob, but it wouldn't turn. The lock was thrown from the inside. My own house had shut me out. Behind me, the laugh kept unraveling. Low at first, then sharper, wet and jagged, like broken glass rattling in a throat. The beam of my flashlight chittered across the yard until it caught on the thing. Stepping forward, it wasn't Miso, not anymore. Her shape was there at first, a small gray outline crouched low in the grass. But it shivered, convulsed, like the skin was only a coat stretched over something else trying to crawl out. The body swelled, bones cracking like sticks underfoot. The legs bent wrong, lengthening, pushing her form upright. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My hand squeezed the knife handle so tight, the wood cut into my palm. The thing stood now, taller than me. Fur sloughed off in clumps, hanging like wet rags. Her face, her face, still held the suggestion of a cat's, but stretched, distorted, jaw slack as though the bones no longer fit. And yet her collar dangled around her neck, jingling softly with every tilt of her head. Meow, it crooned. But the sound was all wrong. Too deep, too broken, dragging syllables like chains. It stepped closer. The soil sagged under its weight, and each step shook through my bones. The eyes glowed, fixing me in place. If you loved me, it whispered in that ruined voice, why'd you put me in the ground? My legs finally moved. I bolted off the porch, across the yard, into the trees. Branches tore at my skin, roots caught my ankles, but I didn't stop. The flashlight beams swung wild, catching glimpses of pale shapes, darting. Between trunks, too fast, too many. The purring surrounded me, above, behind, ahead. I don't remember falling. Just the earth rushing up, my chin slamming rock, the flashlight rolling into the dark. I lay sprawled in the wet leaves, chest heaving, knife lost somewhere in the scramble. And then warmth pressed against me, fur, a weight curling at my side. I looked down, Miso, small again, whole again, eyes soft, the way they used to be. She blinked up at me, gave the gentlest purr I'd ever heard, and rubbed her head against my arm. For one stupid, aching moment, I believed. I reached to hold her. Her skin split under my fingers. The laugh erupted inches from my ear. Claws punched through my chest, and the world drowned in the sound of her collar jingling, jingling, jingling. If you're hearing this, don't bury your pets in the yard. The ground doesn't keep them. It just lets them out.